Here we are, EJ. First episode, Future Proof, where the law meets AI. A lot of hard work just to get to this moment. I'm so excited.
Absolutely, me too. And I think it's an excellent topic, and I love talking about it, and I know you do too. And so I'm super excited to get this thing rolling.
Yeah, me too. So I'll share. Let's start for our audience. Let's share a little bit about who we are and where we come from. I'm Rob Franklin. Been working in Silicon Valley for 25 years, but I am a native New Yorker. What I like to say is I have concrete running through my veins. Still go back very frequently, but I now live in Monterey, California. I'm often blown away that I live like 100 yards from a cattle ranch. And been doing a lot of work in AI. Started out my career as a developer, kind of moved up the ranks, project manager, scrum master, agile coach, then program manager. And then I was leading teams of program managers. And now I am truly focused on AI. I have an AI newsletter called AI Quick Bites. I organize meetups in Silicon Valley AI. Really excited to meet EJ, and I felt we had a synergy from the Silicon Valley sort of AI guy to the Austin, Texas legal profession. Share a little bit about like what you're up to and what brought us together.
I'm EJ Archuleta. I'm actually in Austin, Texas. And you mentioned you live by a cattle ranch. I have a cattle ranch as well. So us Texans, I've been practicing law now for a little over 15 years. My practice is primarily involved representing companies and individuals in protecting themselves. I've served as general counsel for a few different AI companies, served as outside counsel for many companies, and have also been a plaintiff's lawyer and represented people across the world, including people in entertainment. So, wide breadth of experience. And what I actually got started and what really got me interested in tech was in the early 2000s. Early 2000 teens. I started a company and kind of taught myself how to code and how to you know go through all the motions of marketing and all that. They don't teach you any of that in law school, and uh, ended up building that and had an exit. And ever since then, I've just been an avid technologist. Love it. Love talking about AI now. It's the coolest thing out there, I think. And that's kind of a little bit about me. And now I love talking about AI and the law and all the new things. And there's so many new interesting aspects to it, and it impacts everybody in some way, shape, or form. And so I think it's really important this podcast too to help people understand how it can impact them and their daily lives and what's really going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's sort of bringing together AI and sort of what's going on in AI from an innovation, from a startup perspective, what you should be aware of. There's so much new ground here that it being what would be the right legal term that's being created but that hasn't even been decided yet, right?
Yeah, they're called issues of first impression. I mean, they just you haven't seen them. You haven't seen this
Yeah.
kind of issue before.
What am I liable for if I'm using AI products or creating AI products? We just want to have that discussion and share from an entrepreneur perspective, a Silicon Valley perspective, and from a legal perspective, like what you should be aware of as you're dipping your toes into the AI waters. And we want to make it fun. So we're going to talk about barbecue. We're going to talk about like how are we going to get some of that good Texas
Yes.
barbecue as well. So make it fun, make it entertaining, have a good time, and we will learn from you, our audience, like what do you want to hear? We're going to put links down below so that you could ask us questions. Well, everything we talk about, we will kind of provide links to the relevant content that we are talking about. So we're super excited to kind of jump right in here and give you a feel for what our podcast is like. And the first thing, is what we call cue the music, but we don't have any music yet. But this week in the law, like what is something really interesting in AI and the law, and we're gonna rip on it for a couple of minutes, and we'll also include a link. So I think EJ found this, and then I ended up writing about it in my AI Quick Bites newsletter. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what this week in the law?
Well, I think the big thing is that the White House has finally issued some memorandum on AI. The current state of law in AI is, we like to call it like a quilt. It's a patchwork. Different states have different laws. There's no comprehensive thing. It's the same for privacy. It's actually quite frustrating as a practitioner because there's a number of just different things you have to deal with depending on where your clients are, depending on where your business is. I'm always open to see that, hey, the federal government is finally releasing something about what they're going to plan to do to build some sort of comprehensive plan. So I'm a big proponent of that. But what we had was the national security memorandum on AI. It was released on, I think, October 24th. Is that right?
Yeah, I'll tell you
Yeah.
a interesting story why I know that date
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was interesting. I had the opportunity. The Navy Postgraduate School is located in Monterey, and I
Hmm.
played pickleball with a couple of professors there. And we started talking about AI, and I shared what I'm up to. And they said, "Well, we teach a class. Why don't you come in and give a 1 hour sort of overview on AI strategic leadership in the enterprise?" And one of the questions was around, hey, there are a lot of things we want to do with AI, but we have strict mandates like prohibiting us from leveraging AI. And the question was, how long do you think that's going to be? That was the 23rd. And I went, I don't think it's if, it's when, because I literally said, I think it's in our national security interest that we have to kind of leverage AI if we're
Absolutely.
going to be competitive. And then I even said there are nation states that, if they get too far ahead, there's a risk. The next day, this memo drops, and I'm like, wow, that was how often, do I get to be look that smart? Because I'm not that smart. So I felt really good about that prediction. Yeah, and I think it's game changing.
Timing was impeccable.
Yes, the timing was impeccable, and it shows. We've spoken a lot about this, and there's certainly been a lot of writing. There's always that first wave, and there've been a number of waves with AI where it's going to dramatically change the world, and then the pendulum swings the other way, and you start hearing, well, AI is not successful. There's not an ROI, and the pendulum was going that way. I think the government putting this out is a stake in the ground that if you
Hmm.
ignore at your own peril, if you're a company and you are not what I'd say building muscle, because implementing AI and being successful with AI is not a one and done deal. It's like going to the gym is the analogy I use, and you're building muscles, and that takes time and investment. So where you want to be is that you've built up those muscles and you're ready, because when that next big thing comes, it's not going to take you a year or two to implement. It's going to take you a week, a month, a couple of months. So you got to be in the game now. But legally, what are some of the things that you should be doing to prepare? Like, so there's the technology, right, which is one thing. But like, what would be your advice at this point, like for the legal profession? Like, how should they be preparing for AI?
Well, I think it's no surprise that it is going to just touch every aspect from all the way from contract reviews, which we already see companies raising tons of money doing that, all the way to courtroom strategies, and even some of, I can tell you the stuff that I've put in my own practice that helps with damage calculations and different things. I think the biggest thing is to understand who is responsible if AI makes a mistake, right? That's the crux of what should you do legally, because it's all about protecting yourself. And so you can do that, right, through really well worded contracts, good relationships, and also just a general understanding of what is the output that you're looking for and to really test that. So I know that when dealing with as a lawyer, when dealing with vendors who are in legal tech with AI systems, and that what we're really looking to do also is protect our clients, because if we protect our clients, then right, we can protect that attorney-client privilege, which is extremely important and forms the basis of all the relationships. So I really think you need to go through and understand, one, how vendors use your data, and you need to really do a deep dive on their contract. Are they training on your client's data? Do they have security controls? Do they have privacy controls? I think these are some very important things that law firms need to look at when selecting legal tech vendors.
Yeah, interesting. I'm just thinking, how do you vet that? If you're trying to vet if this other company has
Hmm.
these controls in place, you could certainly put it in a contract. Um, but if you're going to vet it, like, are they really doing it? I remember a case I think we were talking about, or you wrote about on LinkedIn. I'm trying to remember it, where, well, I think it was Peloton, right?
Hmm.
Remember,
Yeah,
was in a,
there's a chatbot.
yeah, from a
Yeah.
third party vendor, right? That they
Yep.
were using. Is
Yeah, they
is
had
there a way to
disclosed.
protect you, or is that sort of like, when a long story short, when I worked at my first startup in Silicon Valley and we were doing a deal with Wells Fargo, they literally brought in like 15 people to look at our source code for like 2 weeks. We sat them in a
Mhm.
conference room and then they came up with like 30 recommendations. I don't know if there's any other way to kind of truly vet, right? I don't know. Or
So
what do you think?
I mean, I think it's a good question, but the first thing is that you have to look at, the vendor needs to be SOC 2 certified at least, right? That means that a third party has verified some of their control systems, an auditor. They also need to have that for at least a year. You can actually get it for less, but the ideal is that they've been SOC 2 certified and they've had a window of a year to demonstrate all of that. The second thing is, in these, you need to make sure the risk shifting provisions are make sense for your business. So, for example, you need to make sure in the case of that Peloton, that the Peloton case that we were mentioning, is that the indemnifications work out where if a vendor does something and you wind up liable, how can the vendor also then share in some of that liability if it's their fault? And really step into your shoes. And also, this comes with the fact that most of these vendors need to have proper insurance. And I think that a lot of companies don't have the right insurance from what I've seen as a lawyer. They have some type of insurance, but they don't have the right. And that really comes in and steps in, especially in those situations.
Are you saying insurance is going to change or has to be updated? Is there, I've never heard of this, but it makes perfect sense. Do you need to get like a rider for like AI coverage, or how does that play out? Like,
So
to get that
I've
coverage?
seen very, very limited things on specific AI type coverage, but a lot of the coverage can fall into media liability policies all the way through to director and officer policies if there's any sort of professional liability at stake. But I expect to see more specific insurance programs evolving around AI at some point.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Hey, maybe we should start up an insurance company for AI, like just focused on
Yeah.
that. That's a great.
Well, I
Anyone
do.
out there? This is
Yeah.
your here. This is what you get by listening to us. A great new idea. If you got like $100 million, right, to stake you
Yeah.
or something.
But if not, you can always reach out to me. I do have a brokerage that helps with that helps companies with that as well. So specific
Much
types of
easier.
risks,
That's
it
much
is a little
easier.
easier.
Yeah, awesome, awesome.
But yeah, so
you want to go into our deep dive of the day, or anything else like
Yeah,
we should like touch on? What do you think?
yeah, I think we can certainly talk about this this deep dive, and it's a very interesting case that we're talking about here. It's called the character technologies case. It's an issue of first impression, really, in a way. It marks the first major lawsuit against an AI chatbot company over user harm. I think it really might potentially set some precedent here. I'm not
Right,
sure because it's new, but essentially what happened is there's allegations that a 14-year-old used an AI chatbot and eventually and highly unfortunately did commit suicide. The allegations are that this 14-year-old did it because of things that came from an AI chatbot that was untested. It's tough to wrap my head around the entire thing, and it's an ongoing situation. And also an issue of first impression. Can an AI itself be liable? And if it's liable, who is liable for it? You know, these are systems designed to mimic humans in a way. So
right,
it presents
right.
an interesting question, especially for companies who are building products that might have interaction with children.
I'm wondering, like, the first thing that comes, I mean, it's a horrific situation, but like for financial institutions, right? They have to save X number of years of records. I'm wondering, in sort of this chatbot arena, is there any legal precedent on like you have to save every conversation that ever takes place, or is that right now that's just it's the Wild West and no one knows how long to save these conversations for?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any specific law or regulation that requires somebody to save it because it's AI. Now, there's plenty of them around, like you mentioned, in the financial aspect and in that world, and but largely a lot of that falls to what are companies' internal data retention policies say,
Right.
and do they stick to them?
In a case like this, it would be great for the to have an audit trail of the conversations. Were they proper? Were they not proper? What would be your advice in a situation like this for a company embarking on creating a chat bot aimed at teenagers?
Well, I think that testing would be the number one thing to do, and that's what it seems from reading the initial documents from this is that the allegations are it wasn't tested properly. I think really at the end of the day, this is such a Wild West, uncharted area that if you're a very risk adverse person getting into this area, you might want to take a step back and just let some of these things play out until some of these standards are built so that you could ethically follow them and do it in a
Right.
way where you're doing it things the right way. You know, I've always said just do the right thing, and if you do the right thing, a lot of times I think that as your guiding star, then you can go down the path of where things like this aren't going to happen. And I'm not saying that they did the right thing or didn't. Obviously, we don't have all of those documents, but it is a sad situation. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's definitely some long-term psychological impacts that I know from social media, just use
Right.
alone. And so understanding how AI use and chatbot use can interact with young people, I think is a very uncharted area.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned social media, because what I started to think at the beginning of our conversation was social media has been compromised, right? And there are a
Mhm.
lot of different players trying to manipulate a lot of different things. But like if you take that to the next level, imagine you had a chat bot that was programmed to manipulate you, right? And sort of compromise your mental health, or maybe manipulate you to buy something. It's the next generation, right? Social media, it's the next evolution
Yeah.
of how you can influence and manipulate people. One of the things I've been reading about it, like there's this fine balance between regulation, like over regulation, and you stifle innovation, right? You stifle innovation, then literally maybe national security is at risk.
Hmm.
So that balance of kind of too much regulation, not enough regulation. And, the article that I was reading, like what they were saying is like when social media came into being, right? No one foresaw, foresaw, what? I don't
Yeah.
know, was able to think out like people are going to be able to leverage this to influence a presidential election. And I
Right.
think the same thing with AI. Like, we don't even know what it's going to potentially be leveraged for harm, right? And you're starting to see, like, that someone can manipulate maybe a chat bot potentially to influence, and particularly the vulnerable. So that could be young or that could be old,
Yeah.
right? Like, people,
Yeah.
that's like, wow, it's scary, but then I think that's where yeah, like, have to start. How do you regulate that, right? And how do you ensure that it's, because it could be very subtle, right? Of
Yeah.
influence. It's
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I also read a story about transcriptions, and there it was specifically dealing with healthcare transcriptions. And so a study was done on the accuracy of them, and I'll have to look up this study, and we can put the link below and everything. But the issue was that when doctors would transcribe some of their notes, there'd be pauses and there'd be silence, and in those nuggets of silence, the AI would interpret that in its own way and actually write things that weren't being
Really?
said that were, from what I can recall, was like dangerous stuff. And without double checking it, right? But a lot of what I had seen on the comments of that article was that a lot of the doctors were actually coming to the defense of the AI, and they were saying the benefits here of being able to do this and squeeze in more patients and not having long waiting rooms and all that far outweighs any risk. And really, it should fall back on the doctor to review the transcription. Yes, that makes sense. And
Yeah.
then go right. And I thought that was just such an interesting application of that, and how doctors were coming to the defense of AI itself because the benefits. And so I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
even in cases like this, the benefits of having something like this outweigh the potential for damage. And we're
Yeah.
so new in it that we don't have a great picture, and all we can do is go forward and go through it to get it.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because then you start thinking about like it. Of course, it's a horrific thing. Like, I'll use like self-driving cars. Let's say we know they perform better than humans, but still there are going to be people who are going to be killed in a
Hmm.
self-driving car now, but net net, you're going to save more lives. So it's a hard,
Yeah.
like, I make that decision, like, do you want to lose your left leg or do you want to lose two fingers on your hand? Like,
Right.
you know all right, I guess I'll choose two fingers if I have to make that choice, right? I'd rather not make that choice, but if it's moving us forward, right, and it's not perfect, but it's better, then and that's why I think it's a great way to maybe start wrapping up, right? Where AI, in my opinion, in the next 10 years, I don't know which medical sort of disease it's going to solve, but I guarantee you it will make a significant impact, maybe in cancer or dementia or in an area that what would have taken 20 years of research is now only, in the worst case, will take 5 or 10. And in the best case, they're going to solve it in the next couple of years. And that's
Hmm.
going to be a game changer. I know my dad suffered from dementia, and like watching my dad, it's a horrible disease. And if AI could help us move forward, And there's a lot of doomsayers, and we'll have to get some interesting people on the podcast to talk to pros and cons of AI in the legal profession and also in general. But I think overall, like, you and I are super excited about AI for good, realizing that there's always going to
Absolutely.
be bad players involved. And it's going to be maybe that fine line between, if you overregulate, maybe you keep out the bad players, but you don't solve cancer for another 10 years. It's a conversation you could talk about forever, right? It's just so
Completely agree.
interesting and fascinating.
Completely
So
agree.
let's drop your comments. This is our first podcast. We're going to learn a lot. We'd love to get questions from you. We'd love to get feedback on, like, topics you'd like us to talk about in AI to help you future proof your applications, your legal profession. We'd love to learn more from you. Don't forget to like us, give us your comments. We'll drop some good links in here about what we spoke about. We're so excited to be here. EJ, you want to take us out? Some final thoughts on future proofing, where the law meets AI?
Yeah, I'm super excited to just be a part of this and to be able to talk to people about future proofing their lives, their systems, their practices, and how it AI is going to affect, well, how it does impact everything we do. And really, I'm super stoked on talking to new people and hearing what people who listen to this
Yeah.
want to hear. And so please, if you have a specific thing that you want us to talk about or to get our feedback on, we'd love to hear about it. Let us know.
All right, man. We did it, man. It's
We
taken
did it.
many weeks to get to this
It
point.
is.
We've really worked hard thinking about how to best share and talk. So it's been great to get together. I can't wait, man. So just tell me a little bit. I didn't realize you own a ranch. So
Oh yeah. Yeah.
tell me about that. So do you literally tell me a little bit? I just got to know. I just got, before
So
we
we
go.
have yeah, so my family owns a ranch out in London, Texas. And it's one of those little towns you blink and go through it. It's actually famous for this thing called the London Hammer. That it was this piece of metal that looks like a hammer that they found from, like, it dates back like 20,000 years. So I don't quote me on that. It's some
Right,
ridiculous amount. They're like, how did a hammer get here?
right.
So you can look that up. But yeah, we have a small little cattle ranch. We have Longhorns on it and half Angus running around, and yeah, been going out there for a long time.
Do you sell it, or is do you sell beef, or I
Not
don't
on
even know
not
how to say it, like cattle
yeah.
or?
Yeah, so not like commercially, or like we don't have like a brand, but we have them and I have sold some. So yeah. Yep.
Oh,
It's
I'm
awesome.
looking forward to a good steak, man. I'll tell you
I can
that.
certainly I can send you some. There's a guy who's here in Lakeway, and he has another ranch nearby, and he has a full Texas beef traders, and I go in there and I buy up beef from him all the time. It's all Angus. Delicious. Delicious steaks.
We had this big thing because when we first spoke for the first time, and my last name is Franklin, and I know in Austin there's this famous barbecue spot called Franklin's Barbecue. So we're going to talk a lot about meat. We'll have goofy conversations like this. But thanks, everyone. We look forward to hearing from you. Great first show, man.
Yeah,
Super excited.
absolutely. Likewise. Super stoked. Thanks a
All right,
lot.
man. Have a good one.